Here at Talentism, we believe there is greatness in all of us, and in order to unleash our potential, it's critical to clearly understand ourselves and our reality. Our approach leverages this knowledge to help our clients achieve better outcomes. We call this moving from confusion to clarity. To see how this works, it's important to understand our unique IP. One of Talentism's core clarity frameworks is the 3C model. The goals for this self-study module are to enable you to understand each part of the 3C model, confusion, certainty, and clarity, and their relationship to each other. To connect the 3C model to your own personal experiences so that your learning is grounded in reality, and to describe how to productively move from confusion to clarity. It can be helpful to think about being able to do that as you move through the module. Here's our agenda for how we'll accomplish our goals. First, we'll ground ourselves in the current business landscape. Then, we'll explain what is confusion and why it matters. There are two paths out of confusion. We'll explore the path of certainty, how we're wired to instinctively react to confusion, and then the path of clarity, how we can productively address confusion. And finally, we'll pull it all together and summarize the 3C model. Before continuing, please make sure you have what you need to take notes. A few times throughout, you'll be asked to consider a personal experience to make the content most relevant to you. Your learning will be made much richer by pausing and reflecting. I want to start with how we usually start at Talentism, with reality. We explore reality in the context of business, and these business environments are changing rapidly, especially for high-growth, fast-paced, innovative, big-change companies. These are complex environments, growing increasingly complex as the landscape continues to evolve. And by complex, I mean that it's difficult and often impossible to predict what outputs will be with any given decision. We hope that a certain decision or strategy achieves the desired outcome, but we're still taking a bet. In today's business environment, we can't just set it and forget it. Business leaders have to constantly be taking in new information from their people or the market or whatever it may be, and be learning and adjusting their behaviors accordingly if they want to win. There are more resources, more systems, more information, and faster change than ever before. It's a lot. The key to succeeding in today's environment isn't gathering more of all those things, it's making sense of what's in front of you. And what's often in front of you is confusion. Confusion is the first C in the 3C model, and it's at the core of everything we do at Talentism. The way we define confusion is when your reality fails to meet your conscious or unconscious expectations. That is, expectations do not meet reality. This happens constantly to all of us, personally and professionally. Think about confusion in the context of the complex business environments we've been describing. Colleagues are not behaving the way you expected them to. Somebody missed a deadline or delivered a project with poor quality. A customer didn't react the way you anticipated. Employees are not performing. A boss sent you a confusing email and colleagues misinterpret that email in a way that just confused you even more. There are endless ways that confusion presents itself. You get the picture. However, it's important to note that confusion itself is not a bad thing. It just is. And if we want to understand our reality, we need to understand that confusion exists. The more complex and fast-paced the environment that we're in, the more confusion we're going to experience. Accepting this reality already puts us in a better position to navigate it productively. It's the inability to make sense of confusion that prevents businesses from achieving their goals. Confusion is inevitable. Big change causes a lot of confusion, but it's how big companies and teams address that confusion that really makes the difference. If confusion is not addressed well or left unattended, it is extremely costly. Businesses lose financially, they waste time and productivity. They can't afford this, and yet it happens every day. Here at Talentism, we're kind of confusion junkies. The forms of confusion, the causes of confusion, the consequences of confusion, it all captures our imagination. As the body of scientific evidence shows, confusion is a natural outcome of what we're like, how our brains work, and how they are effectively designed to predict the future. It's how we survive and evolve. As a species, we're really good at pattern matching to figure out what will happen if we do something. If I slap my knee, it's going to make a sound. It's going to create a feeling. If I shout into a cave, it's going to create an echo. I know these things because that's how my brain works. My brain is modeling those things based upon the past experiences that I've had. I've shouted in a cave before. I've slapped my knee before. I can reasonably predict the outcome to each of those actions. The more experiences I have where the outcome matches what I predicted, the more my reality makes sense to me. But reality is not static. When my reality does not match my predictions, my brain senses a threat. The way that our brain works allows us to deal with potential threats as fast as humanly possible. Put my hand on a stove, not going to put my hand on a stove again. This is us learning in response to our confusion. Let's consider what it looks like when confusion is unattended in the business environment. People are expected to do things they didn't realize they were supposed to do. People aren't on the same page when they thought they were. People behave differently than you expected them to or thought had been agreed to. We see people crinkle their brows, change their voice, they act surprised. We're actually naturals at noticing confusion in our environment. The trick really is how we are managing our confusion in response to what we experience. Now let's connect what you've learned about confusion with your own experiences. When have your expectations not met reality? Another way to think about this is a time when you thought what should have happened didn't happen. That's confusion, and we all experience it every day. In your example, describe how your reality fell short of your expectations. What was the impact on you, the situation, or your ability to achieve your goals? Pause the recording to consider your experience. So confusion's real, and our brains do not like it. Not knowing what's going on is painful. Our brains are wired to protect us from that perceived threat, and we instinctively and quickly leap into action to protect ourselves. Let's look at an example. Back in 2017, Trevor, a leader here at Talentism, was creating a certified coaching platform for the very first time, the first major project that he was ever put in charge of. By his own admission, it failed miserably right before it was set to launch. That was a tremendously confusing and painful experience for Trevor. Like most other people, when faced with that sort of experience, he started rationalizing by creating narratives to help make sense of the pain he was in. It helped him feel better in the moment. Those narratives read along the lines of him not being meant to be a leader, and that he was never meant to build a business. He decided that people around him failed to execute their responsibilities in a way that would allow the project to be successful. All these narratives are going through his head to help make sense of what he was experiencing, and they were based upon things that he had previously experienced or had previously seen others experience, but they weren't really based in reality. They were protections for Trevor, protecting him against the actual reality of what had occurred. The collapse of the certification project did not spell the end of Talentism. It did not spell the end of the coaching practice, and it didn't spell the end of Trevor as a leader of the coaching practice. But at the time, the threat he was experiencing, similar to the threats we're all experiencing every day, informed a narrative, a broad generalization that was not useful for him to make sense of his reality or for him to be able to address the confusion productively. Instead, that confusion started to harden itself into what we at Talentism call certainty. The second C in the 3C model is certainty. Certainty, as we define it, is a psychological state where we're maintaining our equilibrium by protecting ourselves against perceived threats. The gap between expectation and reality is the perceived threat, and we maintain equilibrium by filling the gap with something that helps us make sense of the gap. Now, one of the things that has become apparent in the scientific literature over the last dozen decades is that us humans are not the rational beings that we had hoped we were. In reality, our ability to navigate our environment and our ability to make coherent decisions is heavily influenced by our psychological state. If there's anything that can harm us or threaten our view of the world, it has to be mitigated or eliminated. Effectively, this means that when your expectations do not meet reality, when in certainty, you don't update your expectations. Instead, you seek to get rid of the thing that made your expectations wrong. You create a story to make sense of the reality you're experiencing. It sounds bad. Yeah, it is. And every single one of us does it. Why do we use the word certainty to explain this? Well, if you're certain about something, it automatically shuts down the possibility of anything else being true. Why would you bother to explore further? You're certain that your narrative is right. You dig into your story being the truth, and you can become immovable in this perspective. When you're in certainty, it prevents your ability to explore what reality actually is. Let's explore this idea of narratives because it's a central feature in how people act in certainty, especially around how we make sense of people, ourselves as well as others. We often use narratives that assign people to traits of being bad, stupid, or lazy. We call these BSL narratives. Here's what we mean. When we see someone who isn't participating in a meeting and assume that they must not care, they're bad, or that our presentation skills are awful, I'm bad. We see somebody complete a project in a way that's disappointing, and we think, well, they didn't get it, they're not smart enough, or maybe they just didn't put in the effort. We constantly hear executives that we work with talk about how people don't put in enough hours, or others don't see what they see, or the person that they've been struggling to communicate with is secretly out to get them. These are BSL narratives. You create these narratives when you're in a state of certainty because you are certain. You don't allow room to find out what's really going on. You don't explore other possibilities. So then you take your certainty and you behave as if it's true. And you perpetuate confusion throughout the organization. You're behaving in such a way that people cannot make sense of why you're doing the things that you're doing. And then you devote your attention to solving for these narratives. You no longer focus on intentional goals. You're focused on protection goals. You inevitably get bad results and continue to keep making sense of those bad results with more certainty. Whatever the narrative is, it's not actually helping you solve the problem because you're focused on the wrong problem. Certainty is one path out of confusion. Let's summarize. It starts with confusion, and we sense a threat in that confusion. This instinctively leads to fight, flight, or freeze reactions. Following those reactions, we immediately start building these bad, stupid, lazy narratives. We start to seek safety. How do I get away from this confusion? How do I get away from this situation that's causing me pain? We creep into certainty and become stuck there. We only see one way of doing things, and we amplify the confusion of everyone around us. When we enter that protection, we immediately lose sight of what our organization goals are. We become focused on our own personal protection goals. And in that confusion, we create rigidity within ourselves and within the organization. This creates fragility. The consequences of certainty are huge. It kills businesses. We all do it, and most of us don't realize the negative impact it's having. It's actually pretty easy to see the signs of certainty when you know what to look for. It's when the focus is on removing the threats as opposed to trying to achieve things. People become set in their ways. They become set in their viewpoint. They only see one way to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. They jump quickly into unproductive action. They express and feel self-righteous. They look for others to blame for their own failure. They're immediately defensive in response to feedback or criticism. They feel disillusionment and cynicism regarding the motivations or the purpose of the company that they're trying to help succeed. It sounds bad, but it's really important not to lose sight of the fact that our brains are designed this way to protect ourselves. So when we see certainty, it's useful to view it with curiosity and compassion. That compassion makes it possible to investigate and acknowledge that certainty exists. If we judge someone's certainty, it often just leads to, well, more certainty and fragility. So let's pause and explore our own certainty. Take a few minutes to reflect and write down an example of when your own confusion has led you down the path of certainty. Remember, it happens to all of us, so no judgment. What was the gap between your expectations and reality? What did your certainty look like? What was the narrative you created to make sense of the confusion? The more you connect what you're learning to your own experiences, the richer your learning will be. Okay, We know certainty creates fragility and for sure prevents you from unleashing your potential. But certainty is not the only path out of confusion. Remember, confusion itself is not a bad thing. In fact, there's good news, and that is confusion is actually a gift, because confusion can be our fuel for improvement. Without confusion, we don't learn and grow. Recognizing and acknowledging confusion is the first step towards productive learning. It's not a weakness, you're just saying what's happening is not what you expected. It's a part of Talentism's culture that we admit our confusion every single day. And this is no mean trick, given the amount of people, myself included, who have come to judge our own self-worth based upon our intelligence. But ultimately, what we found and experienced is that being able to admit our confusion and deal with it productively is what allows us to pursue wisdom and achieve things that we want to achieve. Experiencing confusion doesn't mean you're not smart, it just means you're human. Acknowledging your confusion opens the door to productive problem solving. It allows us to take the first step down the path of clarity. At Talentism, we've created a culture that not only allows this, but encourages it. And because of this, we learn fast and accomplish more, because we're focused on exploring and truly understanding reality. Moving from confusion to clarity is the goal. Clarity is the third C in the 3C model. Both certainty and clarity address confusion with the goal of regaining our psychological equilibrium. Certainty, as we've described it, is when we attempt to mold reality to our expectations. Clarity, on the other hand, achieves this by purposely updating our expectations based upon the signals we're getting from reality. In clarity, our expectations are continuously being updated as patterns in reality change and evolve. We become better predictors of future outcomes by considering and being receptive to new incoming data. Clarity makes it possible to learn, to grow, and to achieve more. If we want clarity, we must consistently and constantly investigate our own understanding of reality. The pillars of clarity first start with our own self-awareness by acknowledging our confusion. Then, an acceptance of what we're like and our circumstances. Accepting what you're like and the circumstances that you're in is necessary in order to be able to productively deal with your challenges, in order to achieve your goals, in order to achieve clarity. Building upon that self-acceptance is an openness to what we're missing, a humility. We're always missing something. It's important to be aware that we don't have total knowledge. There's lots of gaps in our understanding, and having the openness that will allow us to be able to productively learn and grow. And then, finally, and most importantly, is using your awareness, self-acceptance, and your openness to what you're missing and taking action. Experimenting productively in order to achieve your goals. Clarity without experimentation is not clarity. That's just awareness. Businesses exist to achieve goals. If you want to achieve difficult goals and gain clarity, you need to productively experiment. So the path to clarity is the productive path out of confusion. To summarize, it starts with awareness, curiosity, reflection, recognizing that you're confused, and seeking understanding. It involves engaging in productive experiments, investigating the facts and perspectives of others, and ultimately realigning your expectations to the reality you're experiencing and continuing to go out and explore that reality so that you're getting more perspective. You're engaging in more productive experiments and you're achieving greater and more complex goals. Take the example that we used earlier in the employee who wasn't paying attention during your presentation. Instead of creating a narrative where they're bad, stupid, or lazy, you can start with the acknowledgement that you're confused by their behavior. You can pull them aside, ask questions, engage in a conversation, and seek to understand the problem. You may learn that it wasn't an issue of lack of interest at all, but actually they were dealing with something at home. Or maybe your presentation was super boring and you can learn from that and get better. That's the path of clarity. When you know what to look for, you can notice the signs of clarity pretty easily. You can notice purposeful reflection, acceptance of self and context. You can see greater learning, more experimentation, creatively pursuing intentional enterprise level goals instead of protection goals. You see people cleverly designing around weaknesses, expressing more compassion for others, expressing more gratitude for what others have done. More importantly, getting better in the midst of change. The more clarity becomes a part of how organizations operate, the more they learn and grow and get better in the midst of change. Confusion is a catalyst for learning, and as such provides an opportunity for us to grow and unleash our potential. This is made possible when we choose the path of clarity. Take a few minutes and reflect. Write down an example of a time when you were able to learn and grow as a result of confusion. What was the confusion? What did you do to expand your awareness to better understand your reality? How did this inform your actions? What did you learn? How did you grow? Pause the recording to reflect and write down your thoughts. Let's review what you've learned, pull it all together, and see how the 3C model works holistically. As we review, I'd encourage you to find the logic in the model versus trying to memorize it. We start with confusion. Our reality does not match our expectations. This happens every day to all of us. The more complex the business environment, the more confusion exists. Our brains don't like confusion. The gap between reality and expectations presents a threat. The path to certainty instinctively serves to protect us from the threat. We instinctively leap into fight, flight, or freeze mode, create BSL narratives to make sense of the confusion to help us seek safety from the threat. In certainty, we are stuck, and we perpetuate the confusion because we don't take any action to really understand our reality. This creates fragility and prevents us from unleashing our potential. The other path out of confusion is clarity. We recognize and acknowledge the confusion. We get curious about it. We explore other perspectives to fully understand reality. We see the confusion as an opportunity for learning and growth. We take in new data and update our expectations. We leverage that to productively and creatively experiment, all in service of achieving intentional goals. We grow into our potential. That's why the 3C model matters. Well, there it is, Talentism's 3C model. Let's go back to our stated training goals. Do you understand Talentism's core clarity framework, the 3C model? Are you able to connect the framework to your own personal experiences? Do you think you could now describe the 3C model to others and how to move from confusion to clarity? I'd encourage you to try. It'd be a great experiment to see what you know. The better you're able to describe the model to others, the better your retention of the content will be, and the more likely that you will be able to move from confusion to clarity. From the whole team here at Talentism, we thank you for your time and attention